Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
Oh, I'm doing good. I wish I liked this episode slightly more, but okay. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm about to be blown to smithereens.
Mm.
Yes, we are on to season 5, episode 2, Smithereens. A cab driver with an agenda becomes the center of attention on a day that rapidly spirals out of control. This episode obviously is all about well, actually, I want to say this is, again, we sort of mentioned it, or I mentioned it, this idea of that Brooker has of he's trying to change things up. Technology is less at the center of this, but is the point of this. And I love how it's not the center of this, but the point of this. This is more about our addiction to our phones. So it's more obvious, like spot on, but also about just good road safety.
Yeah, I mean, there's no advanced technology beyond what we have,
No.
I don't think, in this episode. But there is a point late in this episode where I think, is this basically a public service? Like, this entire episode is just a public service announcement for, like, don't text and drive?
Pretty much, yeah. Put your phone down, have it hooked up to your phone for your Apple AirPlay, or if you want to listen to music, not a problem. But just leave the bleeding thing alone. That's the message.
Bob was having a nice drive, and then,
Yeah.
but he couldn't stop looking at his phone. Now he's a murderous psychopath.
Yeah.
Do you want this to happen to you?
Well, that's basically the plot. There you go. What I really like this episode. I really enjoyed this episode. Because of its sort of small simplicity. And also, I like the fact that it has kind of little digs at of other things along the way. I'm a big fan of Andrew Scott, who's the main character, plays Chris, the sort of the cab driver. If you've ever watched Sherlock, he's the guy who played Moriarty against Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock, and he's just really sort of he's a very versatile actor. I think he's really good in this. But this whole thing of having like a standoff with the police, I mean, we've had this with it felt a little bit like Falling Down, or Phone Booth, or one of those sorts of like thrillers that we've had. You have these sort of like standoff kind of films. But I don't know. There was something about this that just sort of worked for me. It's kind of small, it's kind of straightforward, but I just think the acting's really good. And I like the fact that like he figures things out along the way, So he picks up this young guy, Jaden, who works at Smithereens, and Smithereens is Facebook.
Smithereen, right?
Smithereens, sorry, yeah, Smithereen. Yeah. And Smithereens is basically Facebook.
Yes.
And he picks up what he wants to speak to Billy Bauer, who is the head. He's basically sort of the Elon Musk, the Mark Zuckerberg of this platform. And he's got this employee hostage. And the police basically gets chased down by the police. The car careens into a field, and now he's trapped. But he has a gun, and they see that he has a gun, so it becomes a bit of a sort of a standoff. And then as he reaches out, I like the way that this sort of escalates with like the people on the phone. Like there's little bits like that kind of worked. So at one point, he's contacted Smithereen there's like bits of comedy in this that were like totally legit, right? Like he asked Jade, and he's like, right, can you contact your boss? He's like, I've been there a week. Like she won't recognize me. He's like, right, fine, we'll get. He's like, no, I don't have a number. All right, well, can you contact HR? He's like, well, I can't remember it. Can you contact reception? I haven't got the number. Right, well, I'll Google it, and they have to Google the reception number for Smithereens to get through to the. So they have to go through all these like silly, ridiculous steps, and then obviously there's the corporate side of it as well, where they're sort of like trying to sort of manage it in a corporate way, but keep Billy Bauer at a distance and all this other stuff. And I like that the FBI gets involved and all these other things. Like there's almost like a ridiculousness to this, but without being overly silly. Like no one is really portrayed as a buffoon, but it feels that ridiculous. It makes the ridiculousness feel more authentic. Like I can totally imagine this is the kind of thing that would happen. Of like, you know, a large corporate being like, "All right, we're on the phone with the FBI. We've got legal here, HR here, and one of our developers here, and we want to talk about this." And then
Yeah,
like,
I can
what?
too.
Yeah,
And I think early on, this, after sort of the scenes at the very beginning, once you've gotten into the kidnapping, it almost has a sort of caper quality to it. I thought the best example in my mind is after he learns that he's kidnapped an intern, his rant about, all you millennials, don't dress appropriately. You all look like bums, and the guy wearing a suit is, an intern.
yeah.
I thought that was adequately funny and decently acted. Yeah, and I think this stuff at Smithereen, as and Billy Bauer being on the retreat and stuff, I think that all works adequately well. I just I get that it's doing something different. I get that it's not about some advanced technology or something like this. My problem is that I don't think the drama for the most part really works. I don't think that it's as tense as, Phone Booth or Falling Down or something like this. It goes on, and that, yeah, I mean, like, for example, there's a big thing of like these kids photographing it, and I mean, okay, but there's not, it doesn't feel frantic. It doesn't feel like this is becoming a story or something that you feel like, oh, there's buzz across the nation. It just feels like a plot device. And maybe it's just that the cops in Britain are so professional. With the
No.
exception of this hostage negotiator played by the guy from Lovesick, his name, Daniel Ings, who seems incompetent, but otherwise it just seems like the cops are basically, I don't know why the sharpshooter can't make a shot. I could take that shot, and I am not a sharpshooter.
Yeah,
but I just felt very, the more it went on, the more I just thought, okay, sort of like, where is this going? And then it just sort of like doesn't really have a message. I still don't understand why this character does what he does. I don't really care. And at the end, the episode even like kind of shrugs its shoulders and goes like, this didn't matter and was stupid. Let's get on to the next episode.
I disagree. I disagree on that. Because I felt like I agree with some of the drama. Like it undercuts itself a little bit in place. What I felt with this episode, because there is something else that there's another element to this. So you get this thing of like basically he kidnaps him, but one of the things I haven't really explained, or we haven't mentioned, is you see that there's a scene. He's gone to a grief group, like a group for like grief counseling or whatever, and you hear the story of this woman, and she explains about how her daughter just committed suicide, and there doesn't seem to be an explanation. Like no one seemed to know why. And there's another social media platform called Persona, and she's been trying to get into it and trying to hack into her daughter's account. So every day she gets 3 attempts, and then if she doesn't get in that time, she waits for the next day. And so she's like, I need an answer. I need to know what's going on. So you understand this is about grief in some way, and you've got some sort of knowledge. So it unfolds, and you find out that Chris, the taxi driver, like was involved in not a hit and run, actually. He was involved in a road traffic accident, and he's the only survivor. His wife was killed, and the guy driving the other car was killed, and the other guy was drunk. And so it automatically the blame fell on to this drunk guy. And so, you know, you at that point, even at that point, you're sort of going, oh, he's going to this grief counselling because of his wife. And but he's not been able to talk. I mean, he slept with this woman. He ends up having like sleeping with her and gets this information about the persona platform. But you just assume it's straightforward. You know, that's the thing. You assume it's straightforward that, oh, it's about grief. He's missing his wife. And that's when you sort of like, and the twist sort of comes at the end when you realise that the drunk had nothing to do with this. It was actually the fact it was his fault because he was looking at his phone. He'd had a notification. And he explains this to Billy Bauer when he finally gets through that he had a notification. He was on a night drive. He was driving in the evening, was bored, and was just checked his phone. He had a notification and he checked his phone and went to look at a dog photo he'd left and met a comment on or something. And his distraction at that point meant he overshot a stop sign or overstepped a T-junction and got ploughed into by another car. That's the sort of what that's the, and it's this grief. It's this, and I have to say that to me, the pivot of the episode is him when he finally gets to Billy Bauer and he's telling this story and he's like, I've lived for years. I had like these people commiserate with me and try to comfort me and go through this. I talked
to her parents.
Her parents were holding me at her funeral. They were holding me. And he's like, I've had to carry this for years and I don't know what to do with it. Like, this is where, like, you know, you can tell he's clearly tried to go in different ways. And he's like, the only thing I've come up with is I need to speak to you just to let you know, as a user, this is some feedback for you. Do something about it, which I know is wrong because it's not him, it's the phone. It's the phone, but the whole thing works for me. I like that sort of like that breaking, and also the decision he makes at the end. But
okay, I don't think. I mean, this doesn't work for me. I think it's a total failure. You know, I like that scene. You know, okay, so there are things I like and that I don't like. Right, like I like the aspect of grief. You know, Haley, who he sleeps with, who is trying to get into her daughter's account. It's like she's, you know, they're both awkward with each other. You know, they're grieving. I don't know any account that doesn't freeze for longer than 24 hours. If you just lets you just make attempt after attempt. But okay, there is this problem with accounts of dead people, right? So this is torn from the headlines. Okay, all right. But then she comes back at the end as the main character convinces Bauer to do it. Just Bauer volunteers to do a favor for him. And I was moved by that. But then that's not important. Totally irrelevant. It's just a nice little scene that Bauer's just a good guy and did this for him. Nothing ever connects in this episode. Nothing ever means anything in this episode.
Yeah, but that's the point. But I feel that that's the point. That was always the thing for me. Was like doing that nice little thing of asking for persona, of like that's the human connection. Like this whole thing of just commenting on fucking videos and you know photos and looking at your own comments, all that sort of stuff. Is this? It shows like there's a little like the denouement of the episode, if you will, like during the credits. It shows people checking their phones or putting their phones down to go play basketball. Like the point of the episode is the disconnect. Throughout that sort of thing,
yeah,
like the fact that
this doesn't work.
I mean, just for me, I was going to say because the only human connections he's had for years is with this Haley, and so at the end, the choice he asked for, he says, "Oh, do you know the creator of Persona?" He's like, "Yeah, I know Curtis." Cool, and so they actually contact her and give her daughter's login details, and that's fine. Great,
but that's not the part of the climax of the episode. That's not important. We never come back to her and see what she found. You know. It's not important. No, it does give us this little human moment that I liked, but the structure of this episode is very unsatisfying. That's not something he intended to do. No. That's just something that Bauer does to try to feel like he's doing something.
Yes.
You know, and okay, you know, like I mean, but this episode has in the same way when the gunman, this freak asshole person who you know, I'm glad he's dead. You know, I'm starting to feel my oats here. Um, you know, when he talks about how he killed his wife, right? He checked his phone. I'm not saying I'm immune to, the charms of this episode, but so when that flashback starts, we've already seen random flashbacks of, this Clade Shade thing of like, you know, 5 seconds of random shots from the accident. So, that's going to come back. And then it comes back and I sort of groan internally going like, okay, here's where we're going to see this. And we find out that he's responsible. And I'm like, okay, I don't care. And then he says what you said about how like he's hid this, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's good, right? I get this. I can kind of like feel, I can empathize with this character. And then you come out of that, and it's like 3 years have passed. I've been plotting my revenge. I don't know what to do with my life, right? I mean, you can call it revenge or not. I don't know what to do with my life. But instead of moving on, right? Think of how many people murder people and move on, right?
Yeah, but he
Maybe some people
can't. That's
struggle
just
to move on.
it's yeah. It's
But I mean, what I mean, the whole point is like it's almost like a big middle finger to the viewer to say, I want to I mean, I get that I want to file a complaint about how I like your app so much that I looked down while I was driving. And somehow that's your fault. But I'm not really going to say it's your fault because that would be
no,
impolite or,
he's not looking to blame anyone, and I don't think I think revenge is the wrong thing. It's not revenge. This is
So what's the point?
Well, it's about like fixating on an idea, isn't it? Like this is a suicide mission. Like he knows he's going to kill himself at the end of this. Like he knows that. This is almost like it's not revenge. It's like an idea. It's like a worm that's been caught in his head. Like it's not a sensible idea. It's not even a good idea. Like it's been caught in his head, and he's like, this is just obsession. Like he's like, he's not well in that way. Like grief has broken him, and guilt and grief have broken him to the extent where he's like, well, I'm going out, but I've got to do this one thing, and that's all it is. It means nothing. It means nothing to anybody else other than Chris.
I mean, yeah, you're right. It doesn't mean anything, right?
No, it doesn't.
But
Yeah,
why
but
does it?
Yeah, I
Why
don't
does
know.
it mean something to him? I mean, if you first of all, yeah, it's like he's read. It's like he has brain damage, and he's read a newspaper story about how yes, social media is addictive, right? I've read those things too, and I've read think pieces about how maybe this will be regulated in the future the way we regulate smoking now. That was unthinkable when in 1950 that we would regulate smoking as an addictive thing. That was just a choice back then. Now we see social media as a choice. Can't imagine regulating it. I think there's a very convincing argument there, but it's as if in his grief he's read that story and said, yeah, I'm going to kill myself, but I really should set up a complex scheme to wait outside of the Smithereen place, kidnap a person, start the totally illogical idea that I'm going to somehow get to the CEO, right? Which is not going to happen in real life. I mean, the CEO isn't going to.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree. Look,
but, I mean, I like the CEO, and I think Topher Grace does it well, and I think that connection is interesting, and I do like the CEO and this almost compassionate way that Brooker presents him as not a bad guy, right? In this weird way.
Yeah.
But
I think
again,
the thing
I'm
is,
just
you're
kind
trying
of
to
left with like, why do all of this?
Because you're trying to ascribe logic to this person who's been suffering in this way, and I don't think there is logic to be applied to this. Like you said, this whole complex thing. It's not complex. He kind of realizes he's fucked up the moment he's kidnapped this guy. He's like, well, I've kidnapped someone who's got no real worth to the company, apart from being a human being. So he's like, all right, well, it's intern. I've got this gun. He's trying to get away from the police and this other stuff, and he ends up in the middle of a field. Like, there was no real plan to this. Like you said, this is complex. It's not complex because he was supposed to basically hire someone. He was meant to kidnap someone and have them ring the office and say, "I've been taken hostage. They want to speak to Billy Bauer." That was it. That was the idea. I think the point of this episode is that, well, that's not a good
It's
idea.
desperate and stupid.
It's
It's plan, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's no logic. It's all about grief and guilt, and he wants to alleviate himself of this guilt, but he doesn't want to do. And he's still a coward. Like, don't get me wrong. Like this character of Chris is not heroic. He's still a coward. Like, he doesn't want to alleviate himself to his wife's parents or his own parents or a friend or someone else. Like, he's had to distance himself from all that, which is what I think has created this fixation. This is one of those that you'd almost need someone, I think, like a character to sort of try and help push this idea along a bit, because it is messy. Because when he does get through to Billy Bauer, and again, I actually think Topher Grace is very good in this as well. But there's a moment when, like, Chris has told him all this stuff, and he sort of, you can see that he's sort of like, oh, I've reached the goal of what I want to do. I'm having to blow my brains out now. Like, I was never going to hurt Jade, and it's, irrelevant. But then Billy starts going on about how the platform's not what it was supposed to be, and it started to do the thing. And then Chris is like, yeah, I don't give a fuck about your problems. Like, I've got no interest in your, like, this wasn't the point. I don't care. Like, it showed me, like, yeah, this wasn't a two-way thing. This was a selfish act that he felt he could sort of like have this confessional moment to someone he felt would be linked with that app, that he can then die afterwards. That's all it is to do.
I don't understand any of this. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I understand that that's what the episode is presenting. He's in grief counseling already, right? I mean, so he screwed up. And so the point is, the more illogical and stupid and irrational his plan is, the more it demonstrates and dramatizes his grief. Okay, I guess that's a way to read it. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I just, like, when he's got, why insist that if all you want to do is file a complaint about this thing that obviously Billy Bauer is totally aware of already, right? Like, this is not the first person who's texted and driven, or used social media and driven and gotten into an accident. He doesn't need to confess this. The company knows that. Billy Bauer knows that. This is not new. This is not, I mean, but if all you want is to, have somebody hear you, right? Go into the office,
but it's
and fill out a form.
It's not about, no. You see, it's not about being heard by someone. It's being heard by someone he sees as being key to this. Like, and it's not about a form. It's about a confession. This is basically him giving a confessional to someone that he sees as being critical to this app. Like, he's not blaming Billy in any way. Like, he's not saying to Billy Bauer, like, this is your fault, you made it addictive. He sort of, like, Billy Bauer acknowledges it. He says, actually, yeah, we've got an entire department that focuses on about how to monitor and increase endorphin, spikes with people using the app. He acknowledges that that's been done. It's not about that. This is a whole episode. It's not about filling in a form and then walking away and going, well, that's that done. It's more cathartic than that. This is about a catharsis. This is about him trying to alleviate guilt. And it's not about grief. It's about guilt. At the end, you think it's about grief, but then it becomes about guilt because of, and it's just sort of, this is just about a very angry, very guilty, upset person looking to do something. There's a frustration that he's like, I'm impotent in every other way. But I know I can do this, and if I can do this, I can then go. That's all this is about. It's not logical. It's about just trying to deal with that guilt in a way that he thinks is going to make a difference. I don't know, but
he doesn't think it's going to make a difference, and this is what I don't understand. It's like, okay, so if you're racked with guilt and you're behaving irrationally, I mean, to want the CEO of this, billion-dollar company or, trillion-dollar company potentially to personally take your phone call, for that to be important to you. It's so important to you that you kidnap somebody and insist upon it, and that's the whole point of the episode. For that to be so important to you, you've you've got to either you've got to want that person to take some sort of action, right? It's not just like, if what you want, I like what you that you use the word confession, right? But people don't, I mean, if you want to confess to somebody, maybe you confess to their family, the family of the wife, right? You don't nobody has ever said like, um like your Tesla didn't have a fast enough turn radius, and I blame it partially for, you know, I wasn't watching the road, and I blame it partially. So I'm going to hunt down Elon Musk and force him not to change Tesla, not to do anything, but I need him to hear my confession. That's not the way. I mean, there's nothing about this that rings true for me. I mean, if you're going to hunt down the CEO, you want them to do something.
Yeah,
Um,
I still see it as
you
just
see what I'm
being.
saying?
I understand what you're saying, that you want there to be an action out the back of it, but I don't know. I almost, one of the things is as well that one of the reasons you say about the way that the episode presents Billy Bauer as being actually a pretty nice guy. Like, he is one of these sort of like tech dickheads. Like, he's got a no tech retreat on the top of a mountain. Like, you do want to go like, oh, you hipster bell end. Like, he just, but he's presented as a nice guy. Like, he is that
I
sort of,
would do that if I had the money.
yeah. But one thing is, like I said, they present him as nice guy. He actually makes the choice. He turns away all the advice from legal and sort of thing, and he makes a personal connection with the guy. Chooses to make the phone call himself. He does all the right things, really. I think that's part of when Chris gets through to him. I almost think he wanted him to be an arsehole.
Mm-hmm.
And when he's not, I think it's sort of a bit like, oh, you're actually going to listen to what I've got to say. Like, you've actually sort of like, part of the plan has maybe backfired. Maybe you need to see the plan laid out in an early part of the episode or something. But like, it feels like you say that action needs to be, maybe he wanted to humiliate Billy Bauer by saying like he's not humane, he's completely distant from us, like, but he's not. He is a human, and that sort of like when he sort of starts saying about how his own problems, and Chris is like, I don't give a shit. Like, I've just told you I killed my wife because of your, because of my own my own distraction. I don't care about what your app is doing, you rich dickhead. I think he was I think he was hoping for him to be dismissive and everything, and I don't know. It just feels,
I can see that. I can see that, maybe, you expect him to be a dickhead, and then you feel sort of justified, like, right, well, I'm the good guy here. But even that, he doesn't make sense for his psychology as presented in this episode, because he isn't concerned about being the good guy. This sort of like, I don't care, I just wanted to confess. If anybody had the CEO on the phone, and the CEO is saying, yeah, like, you're right, this is a problem, even if you're not anticipating the conversation going in that direction, wouldn't you listen? What do you have to do that's so important? Shooting yourself in the head? Like, I don't know. That struck me as so unrealistic and silly to me. Like,
okay.
just
No, I see what you're saying. I can understand, because I think, yeah, you would be like, because their biggest fear is extortion. Like, the people at Smithereens are like, this is an extortion attempt to that, and it doesn't appear to be. It obviously doesn't end up being that. But yeah, I think you would then try to influence and be like, oh, well, how can you stop this from happening in the future? Like, how can you? I'm not asking you to dismantle your app, but how do you make it better in this way? I'm putting some pressure on you now to make this better. Because then the thing is, like I said, maybe you're right, because this is missing things where if you were going to do that story, then you want it to go down like the Dog Day Afternoon kind of sort of path, where like, okay, well, the news is now involved, and you want this on the front page, and Billy Bauer's now, if Billy Bauer doesn't do something about this, then he's going to get cancelled because he's becomes the villain, sort of thing. I see
Yeah,
what you're
I think
saying,
that would
actually.
be more satisfying to me,
Yeah.
And then there's room for this kind of complex motivation, right? Where
Mm.
it's like, yeah, this wasn't a very good plan, but I felt like I had to do something, and now I feel pushed by the fact that I've actually gotten the CEO. I never thought I would. Now I've gotten the CEO, and now it's on TV, and the CEO actually seems like a cool guy. I mean, if you had that chance and you had killed your wife, I mean, by doing this, wouldn't you, and he's like, yeah, this is a problem. Well, can we shut the app off when it detects that the car is moving? Well, we've looked at that, like, um, well, that might be a safety feature that might limit
Mm.
your liability in the future, Um, how do you understand how that company has slid out of the way? I mean, slid into different things. I mean, that would have been interesting. And I think part of my frustration is also that I find Billy Bauer and what he's saying about not being the bad guy, right? And about like, sure, money guys get involved. And what he's not saying is like maybe they're a publicly traded company and the pressure to post ever increasing profits is so great that I'm accountable for shareholders. And I've been told I'll be sued if I don't
Mm.
impose these metrics. I mean, all of that is in my mind and we don't get to any of that. And instead what we get is like, yeah, I don't really want to talk to you. I've got a CEO on the phone. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to look for a solution here. I don't know. It just I guess to me it just doesn't seem the episode doesn't work dramatically as much as it does for you. It
Mm.
doesn't utterly not work, right? But I mean, and then I just don't buy or really care about this guy and his story.
Okay. See, I did, and then that was the point. Is I really sort of bought into Chris as a character. And it felt like one of those inevitable things where like the only way out for him is at the end of a bullet, whether it's his own or one of the police's. Like it felt that was inevitable. So, what were your thoughts on the way that this did end? The way they have it. So there were three. So they've started to do this thing, as we've said before, where there's like
Mm.
snippets through the credits that sort of show these things. It's really irritating, by the way. It's starting to get on my nerves a little bit. Just finish the
Mm-hmm.
episode and have the credits. Um, yeah. So a shot rings out is the final thing, and Billy Bauer's gone back to his meditation. Haley clicks enter as she's given the login credentials for her daughter's Persona account, and then a shot, and then you assume that now. This is the visit. Do you assume that just that just Chris has been killed, and
Yeah,
Jaden's gone free? I mean, it's that's the sort of best case scenario, isn't it? Like,
that is what I assume.
yeah,
But it is a little ambiguous. I mean, I cannot believe what bad shots these sharpshooters are.
yeah,
I mean, they're not that far away, and these are not complex trajectories. Um, and so the first shot sort of grazes the perpetrator earlier in the episode, and then like it's as if like to add drama to this conclusion the sharpshooter takes a shot as the mother is reaching slowly
mm,
for the enter key. I mean, it's not good to me. And then the shot misses, and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's the resolution. They're not going to go for the obvious shot as she hits the enter key. But no, the sharpshooter has missed completely,
yeah,
and so then they go for the obvious thing. So I sort of assume that probably what's happened is, the perpetrator's been killed. Jaden presumably is probably still alive. Um, but and the main thing is that the CEO is like, right, well, I'm going back to my retreat, and this is the usual sort of cynical Black Mirror ending.
mm.
Nothing's changed. How do you read it?
No, that's sort of what I took from it, and this is the bit I was kind of disappointed in. That I say it's sort of, like I say, that status quo is maintained, which I think is part of the point. Obviously, it's the cynical Black Mirror ending, but I almost wanted there to be some sort of follow up, or like, I don't know. Yeah, it's the ending that feels kind of dissatisfying. Like, I'm not wholly in on that ending, but the rest of the thing sort of does work for me. Like, I think some of the comedy between, not comedy, but some of the bits between Jaden and Chris in the car, sort of work. And it feels more about this thing about human connection, because again, like Jaden tries to connect with Chris as he hears the story, as he's sort of like, relaying it to Billy Bauer. You see this thing of like, he sort of feels for him, and he's sort of like, he says like, you get out, I'm going to kill myself now. You get out, and he sort of, then Jaden's like, oh, I can't. And I think you're gonna say, look, I can't leave you now because you say you're gonna kill yourself. He's like, oh, you've left the child lock on, but it is a cover for him to reach for the gun, and he actually tries to, wrestle the gun away from Chris so he can prevent him. So there's little moments like that where I'm like, okay, there's human connection going on in this episode, which is what it seems to be about. So I'm fine with that. It sort of works on that sort of front. So, yeah. No, I mean, there's not a great deal to talk about in this episode. That's the thing. It's not the deepest of episodes, but I enjoyed it. I thought it works as a sort of short thing. I thought it could have been more complex, or maybe there'd be a bit more to it about, if you're going to talk about social media, maybe you should have people a bit go back like the national anthem route, like have people watching it on social media, like how is this people actually commenting on in the Smithereen office about how many clicks or hashtags this this guy's getting,
Yeah, like the guys at Enron who were high-fiving each other over the California power outages, like right, have the Smithereen folks going like, all right, like Smithereen traffic is up, 80% today, and like, guys, you should not be celebrating this, well, why not? I mean, and I do think if it's about human connection, is his mother dead? He's got the car from his,
yeah, his mother's died. She was,
dead?
she was,
In the intervening 3 years.
Yeah, his mother was ill and she was passing away, so that's why he was being comforted by her parents rather than his own when it came to the funerals and stuff.
I think if they want to make this about human connection, right? And I did like all those moments, right? Including with the with Haley, the mother of the girl on Persona. I do like, I mostly am, not very excited about Jaden as a hostage, but I do like the end where, there is this human connection. But I think if that's going to be the point of the episode, there are lots of other ways to portray that and show, like, I mean, he's in grief counseling. He has options available to him. He's driving around people from his company that he doesn't, take hostage. People talk with their Uber drivers and vice versa. I mean, you could depict somebody who is sort of socially awkward and struggles and kind of make this a sort of more complete commentary on how people are on their phones and not reacting to each other anymore. So I don't know. I feel like this wants to be, this whole fifth season sort of ups the ante and has longer episodes that kind of have a very short movie quality feel to it. And I think you're right. This does sort of feel like a kind of falling down kind of movie. Dog Day Afternoon is a good reference, but I mean, unfortunately, I don't feel like the drama is really there. And at the end of the day, I don't really care about this main character and some of those choices about, like the way the flashbacks handled, the keyboard, finger coming down, him dismissing the CEO, saying, I don't care. I mean, certain things like this just kind of pull me out of the things that are working, that I do admit are working. So to
That's
me,
fair.
it was a lackluster episode, but
Okay.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, this worked for me. I mean, like I say, it's not top rated, but I did enjoy sort of parts of this. But I think we'll leave it there. I don't think there's sort of, I think there's little more to sort of focus on this episode. But ladies and gentlemen, if you like this episode or dislike this episode, let us know. What were your thoughts on Smithereens?
One of us is wrong. You must tell us.
Yes.
The lines have been drawn. Civil War.
That's actually, this is a true Black Mirror. Make your choice. There will be a poll on X, and one of us will be in the next episode. One of us will not. But yeah, no. If you like what you think, find us at Pod Time Space, or under the 20th Century Geek banner on all the social medias. What do you think of this episode, or this season so far? We're only 2 episodes in, but it's only a short one. It's got 3. So, how is it traveling for you? But also leave a review. Let us know what you think, of overall. And if you really like what we're doing, go check out our Patreon for all kinds of things on there. We do a whole load of bonus material from the mainstream stuff, trekking through the Twilight Zone, 30-minute thoughts, so on and so forth. Lots of good stuff on there. Go check it out. Anyway, for now, Julian, it's been a great episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we shall see you on the next episode.